Thank you so much for joining Congressman Mark DeSaulniers' virtual government funding town hall. My name is Janessa Oriel, and I'm the district director for Congressman DeSaulniers. Tonight, you'll hear from the congressman about government funding process and the current status of funding ahead of a possible shutdown, and then we'll take questions live. To ask a question through Zoom, please submit it through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and to submit questions through YouTube, please add your questions to the comments section. I will now turn the town hall over to Congressman DeSaulniers.
Thank you, Janessa, our wonderful district director. And thank you for everybody for joining us. As you who have followed us regularly over the last 11 years know, I really enjoy doing town halls in person. And these virtual ones are convenient for a variety of reasons. When you have a very fluid situation like we have right now, it's just really convenient. So thanks for joining us. And the feedback we get is largely very positive, which is a good thing, and somewhat unusual nowadays, given our polarized political atmosphere in this country. So we're going to go through this. I'm going to try to go through the PowerPoint relatively quickly, but as you can imagine, the history of and the funding of and the structure of government funding is complicated. This is the largest economy in the world, the US economy, and the structure of the federal government is large. As is the state, the local governments, the founders wanted the power to be diffused, including our budget process. So having been involved with budgets on the Concord City Council, on the County Board of Supervisors, in the state legislature, and now in the federal level, it works when we stick to the plan, I think, and it helps bring us together and be more efficient about how we use your tax dollars, which I think should be a priority for all members of Congress. Policy obviously is important, but funding, I think, is largely underestimated in terms of how you manage it and how you make sure it's performing well with real performance guidance. And as a former small business owner who made a long, successful career in a tough business, I was sometimes described as a numbers person. In the restaurant business, that was a good thing. And I had some very creative partners, but making sure you can pay your bills on time and reinvest in your product is really important. And it's made me really enjoy, but sometimes get frustrated with our budgeting process in government. But generally, it works well when we stick to the rules. And right now, we're not sticking to the rules. And as the PowerPoint will show, we haven't consistently for quite some time. And is indicative of the 30 years, well, more than 30 years now, 30 years of our polarization. So first, here's our district. For those of you who are frequent viewers, you know I always start this way. There are 435 House of Representatives districts in the United States. Very grateful that you allow me to represent this district for the last 11 years. And as most of Contra Costa County, it changes every 10 years based on our normal procedure. And every district, from the local level to the state to the federal level, is required to do that based on guidelines that come out of the 10-year census to make sure the districts are proportionate and voting rights are also protected based on federal law. So ours is most of Contra Costa. We used to have most of West County, and the most recent iteration took us all the way to the eastern border with a little part of eastern Contra Costa, and that's Discovery Bay in the far right hand as you view this map, and down into Alameda, including most of Dublin and the 680 corridor and 24 are very prominent highways that sort of frame most of where the population is. And then that big open area in the middle is largely Mount Diablo. Next. So this is the process. This is about as concise as we can make it and still have it be meaningful. So I'd suggest to you saving this and referring to it. This is the process we should stick to. So the president submits to Congress his original budget on the first Monday of February. It goes to the Congressional Budget Office, which is a statutorily required bipartisan institution that historically has had great fiscal respect because it is filled with economic analysts when they do their job, and they almost always do. It's more of a tool to instruct us on what the budget, what the president's budget, which comes out of his Department of Finance, and how the CBO analyzes that to the consequences, both to the deficit, our debt, and performance standards. So usually people trust that. Recently, under this administration, both the first time and second time, my Republican colleagues have questioned the CBO as not being nonpartisan enough, bipartisan. I would disagree. I think the whole idea is to keep those partisan pressures, both Democrats and Republicans, away from the budget analysis. So we base that on really thoughtful review by financial experts. Again, I'm sorry, this is the way I ran small businesses. You've got to be analytical. You can have your opinions, but if your profit and loss statement isn't working in a restaurant, you get bigger problems, and very different. At this large an institution covering this many people and other public and private agencies, much more complex. But the basic theory, I think, for me at least, is to be responsible, whether you're, regardless of which party you are in. So he submits, CBO comes out, the Congress passes budget resolution, and that's just a guidance. So in Congress, the budget committees give a guidance. In California, it's different. The budget committee, actually, which I was on, I think the entire time I was there, and chaired two important subcommittees during difficult times, Health and Human Service and Public Safety. In California's case, and different states have a different way because our Constitution requires a balanced budget with a framework again, but it's a responsible framework in my view. The budget committee has more power, and appropriations does as well. In our process, budget recommends based on the CBO analysis of the president's budget proposal, and then we go to appropriations and start going through here in May when it works. By June, the appropriations committee, who have subject area experts in every area on both parties, work together when it works to approve appropriations bills. Goes through the House first, Senate second. The Senate has to approve fiscal bills, but it originates in the House. The founders put that in the Constitution, believing that the House, and I believe this too, is closer to their constituents and closer to the real life impacts of our budget decisions. And then in August, we get a break where we go back to the district and we have a chance to explain our positions on the budget, and then have constituents give us feedback. All appropriations bills, as you say, as we go clockwise around the clock here, all appropriations bills should be passed by both chambers and signed into law by fiscal year ends in September 30. So our fiscal year is not the calendar year. As this clock wheel refers to, a fiscal year is different from the calendar year. There are reasons for that. And this is a similar, in at least in the state of California's budget process, and local government feeds in all this similarly when it works. And then the new fiscal year, not financial year, fiscal year begins in August. And then OMB, the Office of Management of the Budget, starts to determine the next financial year, fiscal year, that the president will support from agencies proposals. The agencies submit final requests for OMB, so the Department of Transportation, EPA, Department of Commerce, all of those departments that have cabinet secretaries submit, and then we start the process again. That's the way it should work, but let me give you the history, unfortunately, of our history since 1994, when the Contract for America by Newt Gingrich, in my view, started a lot of these fiscal irresponsibilities and a lot of the polarization that we live with now, 36 years later. Next. So this is just a background, a little more detail, but it's somewhat redundant to what I already showed. But you can see the funding for government involves these 12 different bills that I alluded to, and then gives time for Congress to have open public hearings where the public can watch, people can view it. Nowadays, you can view it on television, and the federal government channel, and as we go more to streaming, you can view it that way. So next. So this is the history. Unfortunately, I mentioned 1994, the year of the contract on America, Newt Gingrich, when we really started to get much more polarized. It had been going in that direction, but in my view, this is when it really started. And there's a lot of good reporting, good writing about the history of that and how we got to this point. So we, instead of following the process I just introduced to you, we have done what in our parlance is CRs, continuing resolutions, um, with some hybrid of appropriations having a say in that, as opposed to the, the process we should have. So we've taken this to larger bills, and they're called mini bus bills in our vernacular. But again, this is another slide on the timing and how it hasn't worked. And you can see right now, right at the top bullet, since 1977, so this was leading up to that 1994 year, we were having problems. All but 3 fiscal years since 1977 have been CRs, so we didn't follow the budget process. But that process has become more broken as time had gone along. Full year CR was enacted for the remainder of this fiscal year, again, ending in just less than a week. And that's what we're standing in front of right now. I will fly back Sunday night, Monday morning. We are required to be there. We're not required because the speaker canceled these two meetings on Monday and Tuesday to try to avert the shutdown, to put pressure from his view to get the Senate to pass what they sent over. If the Senate passed what the Republicans sent over, the Democrats all voted against it, uh, then it could go to the Senate. But if they change it, it has to come back to us. So the pressure by Speaker Johnson and the Republicans is to the Senate, take it or leave it. And now there's a game going on who is going to be blamed by the public. Obviously, I feel very clearly, not having been involved at all, or our leadership being involved in these discussions, it was a take it or leave it. And this very strange process that we continue to go through. They have to get 60 votes in the Senate, which the majority right now is 52 Republicans, 48 senators, so they need Democratic support. And right now, the Democrats in the Senate, I think correctly, are holding firm and saying, this is supposed to be a negotiation between the two parties, and the fact that you are trying to extort us in the US economy, um, we're not going to stand for that. I didn't think we should do it last time. A lot of criticism of Senator Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, for agreeing to it. I didn't support it last time because I've tried in the 11 years I've been in Congress to work with my Republican colleagues, and it hasn't worked because you spend hours with them working and respecting their conservative worldview, but trying to recognize that we're there for a reason and we represent different communities, and we should all respect that and work through the process and come up with a compromise that is reflective of the country's differences. Instead, this is, in my view, just we're going to take the economy hostage and you either take it or leave it, and then we'll try to blame you. Um, and that's for the public to um, ascribe responsibility. Obviously, I feel very strongly that we as Democrats have worked hard to try to engage, but we have been told, as in the president said, I don't want Congress to work with them. We should ignore them. I don't know. I don't understand that feeling, and I'm a very progressive Democrat, and as many of you know, former Republican, who voted much the same way when I was a Republican. I believe in the social contract and our responsibility to one another, but I think also as a former business person, we should be very aggressive about our oversight role in how we spend your money. So I do support legislation that we have introduced that would statutorily say Congress cannot do these shutdowns again. It has a very negative impact on everyone's life and the global economy and our economy. It's really not good. My analogy to my business experience was you don't shut down a business when it's moving along and expect all the customers to come back. Not to mention the fact you can't pay your bills if you don't have people coming in the door. Next. So this is a reflection, both houses, of how close we are in terms of the numbers, but then it's also unfortunately reflected in um, how ideologically and partisan driven we are. I don't think this is ever remotely um, symmetrical between the right and left. That's the right way to say it, asymmetrical. Um, it's just the since Newt Gingrich, Republicans have moved further and further into this world, and there's lots of good writing on this as well. Um, it wasn't the party I registered to many years ago. So it's very close, and it might seem looking at that it's easy for us to reach across the aisle and get a few people to agree with either side, and it's not for a variety of reasons. It's very hard. I think, particularly on the majority side, they're very afraid of primaries, where President Trump has basically said that if you disagree with anything I do there as an equal branch of government, um, then you will have a very nasty primary against you. Does that happen in the Democratic side? Yeah, we have primaries, and that's part of democracy. But um, there have been hard-nosed presidential administrations in both parties, but nothing in my reading of American history like this one. Next. So we're sitting right up against this deadline. They haven't passed one of the spending bills. Hopefully, when we go, but the fact that we knew this deadline was coming and they didn't finish that appropriations tells you that the dysfunction of the appropriations process. Next. Um, this is what they've already done. So they went back and took money that we had appropriated in the last cycle, such as it was. And according to the Congressional Budget Office, and I will say the Kaiser Family Foundation, two very respected analysis groups, 14 to 17 million people will lose their health insurance. That's their analysis. And between the 2 years that President Trump was in power with both House and Senate majorities, their biggest accomplishment was the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of the country, again, in my view, to the top 5%, really concentrated to the top 1%. We have arguably the largest concentration of wealth in the history of the country right now, surpassing the Gilded Age, and this is very dangerous territory. We work really well as a country when the wealth is distributed like the 50s when President Eisenhower was president. It was the largest growth in GDP in history, and it was the largest increase in the middle class and wealth to everybody when everybody's working responsibly and contributing. It works well if our tax structure is right. And right now it's very skewed. And that last bill passed without a Democratic vote when he was president the first time with both houses. They extended in the Build Back Better bill. I call it the big ugly bill. So that was about to run out. The argument there was by the Republicans, if we give tax cuts to all these wealthy people, that'll trickle down, if you remember that expression from Reagan, and everybody will benefit. Well, most of the majority of economic analysis of trickle down is it doesn't work. Middle class people spend their money and try to save money when they have discretionary income, and people with a lot of wealth keep reinvesting it. And as you've heard me say, Lincoln said famously, labor and capital, meaning wages and capital, must always be balanced. And if ever capital becomes advantaged, then we've lost democracy. And I would say, in a large part, Lincoln was right then, and he would be horrified at what we're doing right now with this idea that if you keep giving people with billions of dollars more money, how somehow everyone would benefit. I would recommend a lot of work by Joseph Stiglitz, a Nobel Prize economist who's done a lot of great work on this. Thomas Piketty's work, French Nobel Prize winner economist, just on the history of these things in developed capitalistic market economies. It doesn't end well when all of this wealth gets at one part of the economy, and we're really in rough shape right there. And I'm shocked we haven't corrected it in a bipartisan way sooner for everybody's benefit. So healthcare coverage, tax cuts for billionaires. We're cutting healthcare and cutting nutrition programs that work in terms of getting people healthy and getting them to be able to provide for themselves or continue to provide for themselves. One of the things that my Republican colleagues said about in terms of applying work requirements, 85% of the people who are on Medicare, Medicaid, I should say, Medi-Cal in California, are already working full or part-time. They just aren't making enough money, so they qualify for Medicaid. And by the way, the rest of the developed world has much more robust social safety nets, and they do fine. We could learn some things from the rest of the developed world. They could learn things from us for sure, but when it comes to budgeting, um, it's just we're in a tough shape. And we used to be the model for the world, and of course that's reflected in the fact that the U.S. currency is the global economy, a global currency. So, what we have insisted on is let's go back and fix it. Let's allow the Congressional Budget Office, the General Accounting Office, institutions that have historic reputations for being nonpartisan, let them evaluate the efficiencies. And if we can increase more efficiencies, I'd be all for it. But Elon Musk and his dope what is it called? Doge, I call it dope, had really no fiscal analysis. It was just down, cut everything. People, dedicated people who we get a lot of value in from as taxpayers, a lot of whom I have known and seen their work, have lost their jobs. And according to what we're hearing in the news and from the administration, if we shut the government down, which means them, Congress, then the majority, then they're going to fire or lay off many, many more hardworking public employees. And that's really bad. Trying to get young people to go in to be public health officers or the Department of Justice, such as it is now, but trying to get people to go into these fields has been a challenge. And this stereotype of public employees by the Republicans is a myth. Are there people who do great and people who do poorly? Absolutely. Any organization has that. And people move around. We all have good times as workers, and sometimes we don't do as well as we would like or our employer. But the vast majority of people in my 30 plus years of public office, the people we get to work in government are hardworking, dedicated people who like the security and oftentimes less pay of being in public service. And they get, I tell you, there are some people who are just remarkable in every single level of government who serve the public because they're patriotic and believe in this country and are proud to be public employees. And they're in the vast majority, in my view, in my experience. So getting people to work well, whether it's a restaurant or in a big organization, is not as simple as Elon Musk would prescribe. Having met with him, I never mind. We don't have enough time for that discussion. So, anyways, this is a really illustrative uh, um, uh, graph, and again, it's by the CBO, so requires to be nonpartisan. But this is a mythology from the Republican right about how they're the fiscal stewards. You can see where the deficit's gone up and when it's gone down, and it's pretty declarative of the deficit going down and going up, depending on who's in charge, and particularly when they have both houses of Congress and the White House. By the way, our credit ratings reflected by Democratic leadership being more responsible. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to believe because you get just inundated with conservatives being fiscally responsible. But as that chart shows, at least in our recent history, that's not true. And actually, overall, we could go back further. So these are the things I've alluded to. You're going to have a hard time getting services, but some of it is secured by statute. So Social Security and Medicare, I met with a group of seniors in Brentwood today, and they're very concerned. There's a lot of anxiety out there, and it's really unnecessary. I mean, this is really the cruel part of this administration. Um, people who are vulnerable are already in level of anxiety, and those seniors worked their whole lives. They paid into Social Security. There was a American contract agreement that would be there for them. It will continue to be with them, only because it's protected. But if you have issues with Social Security, Medicare, it's going to be very hard to get a hold of anybody, and it's already we've a lot of the folks who answer those phones work very hard, but they're very underfunded. There aren't enough of them, and we're losing people going into these jobs as well. So it makes it harder as an employer to get people to go in and do a good job. VA medical facilities, of which we have one in Martinez that I've spent a lot of time on, remain operational, but again, there will be strains because all of this is interrelated. But you should be able to get all of that. If you have problems and you live in our district in Contra Costa and Alameda, please contact us. We will open a file for you and do everything we can to find out what's going on. I will say we've got 18 employees for 750,000 people, and Janessa and our staff work very hard at this. That's 18 for DC and here. So they work very hard, but they will answer the phone and open up a file for you and work with these agencies. But it gets harder when there's no one answering our phone calls. So all non-essential federal functions come to a halt. Many federal employees would be furloughed, and now we're concerned that they would be terminated, and then there'll be court cases, and a lot of them will live in limbo, and it will have an impact on everybody's economy, everybody's budget. So we're going to stay open. We'll be there for you. We're going to roll up our sleeves and respond to you. We respond. You don't have to agree to me with me or my worldview. If you need help, we respond, and we respond quickly and efficiently. And I'm very proud of our office. For the 11 years we've been here, we're one of 6 offices recognized for our constituent services out of 535 offices in the House and Senate. 6 offices been recognized for our excellence in constituent services by the Congressional Management what am I spacing on? Foundation, Congressional Management Foundation. They're a bipartisan, very respected, and you can go to their websites too and see what they do to do overview on how we are doing. So I'm going to stop there and go to questions. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a very difficult period. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I don't like what's happening. I hate it actually, and it's causing anxiety and stress on individuals in our own system that, to me, I do not understand why anyone would want to do this to our country and to individuals, whether you're conservative, Republican, Democrat, or progressive. This is just thoughtless policy in my view. Let's stick with the process, be open and honest, have our differences, and demonstrate that in public hearings and on the floor, and then go back to our constituents and hear them out. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. We will now move to our question and answer section of our town hall. As a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen on Zoom, if you're watching on Zoom. And if you're watching on YouTube, please submit your question in the YouTube comments. Thank you so much. With that, I bring the first question. This one's from Kathy. Can you please address how you plan to vote on the upcoming budget?
I already voted no on the bill that's over in the Senate now. So I would only have a chance, and I voted last time no when Senate Democrats compromised. I disagreed with that then. I want to work with compromise, but it's got to be good faith for negotiation. The current leadership, particularly with this president, doesn't negotiate in good faith, in my view. And I voted against it because I think if you continue to reward bad faith negotiations, it's going to continue. So unfortunately, they're in the majority. They control both houses. They need to get votes from Democrats because of 60 vote threshold in the Senate. But all Democrats voted against it. Republicans voted for it. And I will vote against it if it's at all like this again. And we all voted against the big ugly bill as well because of the fiscal responsibility and the cruelty, in my view, to the American public.
Thank you. The next question is from Jeff. In the case of a government shutdown, news agencies are reporting that those affected will be part of a reduction in force. In my view, such action is punitive to those affected. Can a forced reduction in force be stopped?
It can, but it has to go through the courts. So since where we in the minority have to use the third branch of government as much as possible with partners in the private sector to bring challenges where we clearly think what they're doing is illegal. So I would recommend a nonpartisan nonprofit called Democracy Forward. You can go in real time and they will tell you in real time the success of those challenges. Last time I checked, they had won 97% of the cases against the administration. Now, due process is deliberative and slow between filing the process in the lower courts, the appellate courts, and then up through the process. So people suffer while we're going through this, and it takes a long time. So I pay attention. The two sites I really like are Democracy Forward, which again is a nonprofit, and for its nonprofit status requires it by the IRS to be nonpartisan. And they've been doing this a while. And then the Brennan Center for Law. And if you look at those, you can see in real time, I mean, daily, they keep it updated. So that's where we're fighting these things. And for federal employees, a lot of you and your unions are key partners in protecting you through the courts. Now, am I saying that solves everything? 97% success rate sounds great, and I'm proud of that. First administration, Trump administration, we were 78%. But that speaks to these are Republican and Democratic appointed judges making these decisions about how brazen this administration is. And unfortunately, they're co-enablers in the House in particular and in the Senate. But it still causes a lot of pain, suffering, and it's really inefficient. I mean, you should avoid lawsuits. You should work, whether it's in your private life or in owning a business. It's just inefficient to have to do this, and it costs money. Those folks are raising money with donations.
Excellent,
They're
thank you.
required to.
The next question is from Kylie on YouTube. If we enter a government shutdown, how does Congress work to pass the appropriations or CRs?
Well, it should work the way I outlined it, and that's the responsible way to do it. With this environment, I'm afraid it's more like an election racket. It's take it or leave it. We have the votes. For people in the majority who have doubts, they're quite frankly threatened politically. And those campaigns are meant to psychologically intimidate people very deliberately. And because of Citizens United, that's a lot of what changed everything. So Citizens United was a decision on a 5-4 vote when all of this problem started that said that all the years of precedents that said that campaign contributions should be to the candidate. That decision said you could go outside the candidate as long as the organization outside didn't talk to the candidate. Well, that has exploded, and it was by design, in my view, reading what the Heritage Foundation and the Koch brothers wanted to do. These are people who don't, in my view, believe in democracy, and some of their writings, they say that. They'll say we were a republic. Well, yeah, the founders at that time, 250 almost years ago, were put in our documents. But as I read the statements by all of them in the written word, and I love reading these. I've got on my desk up here my well-torn Federalist Papers from that period of time, Jefferson, Madison, and Jay. And Madison's favorite quote, I think it's in 10, said, "If people were angels, there'd be no need for government." Well, this is the framework that the founders thought about. But at the time, it was a small group of white men who owned property and they could vote. But when you read their writings, they aspired to, as literacy grew and public schools took root, particularly Franklin and Adams, but also the Southern founders, they believed as people became more engaged in the democratic experience that more people should vote. That's my interpretation of their writings, and I have spent a lot of time on this. I'm not a constitutional expert, But one of the reasons I'm so grateful to be in the position I'm in is because I really love this country and the experiment it is, based on what I've experienced in life, but what I've read and listened to from people who are conservatives and progressives and liberals. It's part of the process. Listen to people.
Excellent, thank you. The next question comes from Chris. What happens with travel-related employees, TSA and FAA?
Well, they will stay because the public safety people should stay, but there'll still be pressure on you because the other agencies that help all the infrastructure and help you do your job will be strained. So that's another place where you will see it, even though those folks will continue to be there and get paid. So it's not shutting down everything all at once, but it is a shutdown because it shuts down the majority of the government. And thank God that we at least have those things like Social Security, Medicare, and public safety.
Next question comes from Sheila. What would you do? What would you do if you don't shut it down when Republicans will not negotiate?
That's their decision. If they're not negotiating in good faith, it's extortion in my view. And we've tried, and every time we've tried, they have gone further. So I've been in a good deal of negotiations over my life, both in the private sector and the public sector. When you're negotiating with somebody who refuses to move towards you or even meet with you, you don't have much choice. That's more extortion and robbery, if you ask me. Then, so I feel very strongly for myself. Um, I'm not going to vote for something when we've tried to work with them and they keep cutting services that really hurt Americans. I just won't do it. I can't do it, and I won't. And I'll fight to stop it.
Thank you. There are several questions there's a number of constituents that would like to hear if you have any comment on James Comey's indictment.
Absolutely outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. I mean, this is a direct attack. You hear this a lot, but the President of the United States and the people around him are, in my view, unhinged. Attacking Comey this way, and I'm shocked that a grand jury did it as quickly as they did, but we'll see all of that. So the process has got to go. But I sat on the oversight committee when Mueller came in front of us, when Cohen came in front of us, when Comey was the AG. I had a lot of differences with him. I was able to talk to him a couple of times. Marlon Garrick, I got to talk to multiple times. These are good people. They're human beings. But this really erodes a very important institution that's had its ebbs and flows. But I think he's an American hero, personally. Not only should he not be going through this, but we should really be grateful for his service. Did he make mistakes? Oh, yeah, I think he made mistakes. He affected the presidential election that allowed this current president get elected the first time in a way that I thought was not a good idea. But you got to, folks, as dangerous as this is, we've got to stick to the process, but we got to fight like hell within that process. And we have to insist that this kind of political justice is bad for everybody. And it's not hyperbole, folks, to say this is not dissimilar from the 30s in Germany. I'm not saying that we're there yet, but it's eerily similar to it. And when you start prosecuting a attorney general based on your political opinion, that better be, we all should be frightened.
Thank you. This is from an anonymous attendee. Can you talk about HR 1's impact on food security programs? How will it affect people and what, if anything, can be done about it?
So this is the SNAP program. They've got millions of dollars to this. It stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This again has been reviewed and analyzed by CBO and outside nonprofits that have analyzed it. It's a very good program. When I was out at the senior housing in Brentwood just a few hours ago, this was one of their concerns. And there's a
Mhm.
picture that we took of me looking in one of the food pantry bags that was supplied to them by the Food Bank of Contra Costa, wonderful nonprofit that we help with. And I was on a panel last week that I think is available online to talk about the impacts here in Contra Costa. So SNAP doing away with it is, again, it's madness because it's been analyzed over and over again to how beneficial it is so that people in need get our community support based on the analysis that this helps people get through difficult times so that they can get to the point where they are healthy enough that they can help themselves, but also help each other. We all have swings in life generationally, and even if we're fortunate enough uh, to do well, well, Bible says, there for the grace of God, go I. It's one of the reasons this is here. It's not a handout. It's a contract with us as human beings, and it's really a good investment. So SNAP, it's outrageous what they're doing, and it's putting pressure right now. SNAP in some ways is worse than Medicare because SNAP is the Medicare cuts. They were very Machiavellian in saying they won't go into effect until after the midterms because they want to keep control. Historically, the minority party wins after the first 2 years of whatever party controls the White House. So Democrats should historically gain it, but this is what all of the shenanigans are, and I'll just say it, cheating in my view, which lowers us all. So that's going to be a real concern, and we're active working with nonprofits and with public agencies to see how we can come together when these cuts happen and make sure we're all supporting each other to get through this until we can fix it. And in the meantime, we're going to work like heck, and I will say this, I will work with the Republicans, and I've had these conversations and animated ones with people who I respect to a point. I can't believe that some of these folks are going along with this, but I understand the pressure they're under, but I wouldn't do it. If a Democratic president was doing this, I would not, they could do what they want to me, I would hope, and I firmly believe. SNAP is a real problem. Those SNAP and the Medicare cuts are the worst part of the big ugly bill, HR 1. And I want to mention in contrast, HR 1 means House Resolution 1. It's the first bill in a session, and the majority party submits that as a statement of priorities. In the 2 years, in the 11 years I've been in Congress, it'll be 12 years next year, I have only been in a position where Democrats controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House for 2 of those 12 years. Everything else has been by separated. In that same period of time, the Republicans controlled all 3, Senate, House, and the White House. The first 2 years of the presidential and Trump's administration, first 2 years now. Their HR 1 in both those instances gave the biggest transfer of wealth from all of us to the top 5%, 10% if you're being national and generous. It's just a switch. It's the opposite of Robin Hood. And all that concentration on top we ever had. HR 1, when we were in charge for those 2 years, by a wonderful friend, John Sarbanes from Maryland, and I was a co-author of this, went to campaign financing and Citizens United so we'd get money out of politics based on the real life conditions and what we thought the Supreme Court would prove. We passed that out of the House, and the Senate didn't take it up because the Senate was controlled by Republicans. No, wait, that time we were, but we needed 60 votes to pass it, so they never took it up.
Thank you. Next question is from Jim. If we end up losing the ACA healthcare premiums battle, do you know if California can help?
They will try, but we don't have in California. As I mentioned in my introduction, I was proud to be the chair of the Senate Budget Subcommittee that had Health and Human Services during the recession. We did a great job of getting us out of there. And that was a real challenge because the ACA had just been implemented in California, and it wasn't the cause of these problems, but trying to keep everybody together. So we were in that circumstance, but it wasn't this kind of national cut. So can California do it? Yes, but it's going to be extremely heavy lift and a real challenge. And I, by the way, spent a lot of time with healthcare providers the whole time I've been here because it's my two of my biggest areas of interest are transportation and housing and healthcare. I am the chair when we in charge of the Health, Employment, Labor, and Pensions subcommittee in the House. Um, so those areas I've spent a lot of time in, and this is going to be a heavy lift. But I've been meeting with all the providers in Contra Costa and Alameda. I've spent a lot of time with them, particularly the county agencies. Who what we're doing in healthcare is changing decades of improving services so you don't end up in the emergency room. So getting primary care doctors, getting clinics, making people realize that nutrition and exercise is really helpful at preventing um, illness. Now with this, people are going to be going to the emergency room with very serious health problems, and they can't. God bless them. They're heroic. Whether you're going to Kaiser or Sutter or John Muir. John Muir is the trauma center for the county, or the county. This is going to put real pressure, and it's so stupid fiscally because it's going to get people sick and sicker. And the place they go is the most intensive place to get care, and those emergencies are required to be the provider of last resort by federal law. And God bless them, they'll do their best, but we're not helping them.
The next question is from Jillian. If the government shuts down and employees are fired, are there plans to accelerate the process through the courts so employees don't have to go without pay and citizens don't have to go without services for months? I think the administration would drag it out, which is bad for the country.
Yeah, so we've gotten better and better at this. Unfortunately, they have gotten more devious about it. My word, I'm sorry if you're a conservative listening, but I'm happy to talk to you too and try to respect where you're coming from. But this is beyond anything. So unfortunately, we will, and our partners will, and they're prepared. But I'll be honest, I don't think anyone, well, I'm sure there were people who were prepared. I'll speak for myself. I was prepared for really horrible. I didn't think the election would be the way it was, but it was. And we, in marked contrast to when he lost the election, we respected the election. Um, but I never expected anything like that. But since January 20th, when he took office, we have responded aggressively, and we're doing everything we can. But I've sat with employees at Region 9 that the federal um, government is broken up by region. Region 9 is headquartered in San Francisco. We have a lot of federal employees here. Of course, the most are in DC. And I've had personal meetings with just wonderful people. And I'm sorry, I get emotional about it. They didn't deserve this. So, do we have plans? Yes, but we shouldn't have to go through this. And they shouldn't have to go through this.
We likely have time for 1 to 2 more questions. The next one is from Greg. I understand that several Republicans support extending the healthcare subsidies before they expire this year. Can you comment on why these Republicans are not addressing this in the latest CR? Perhaps they will support in the next CR.
I really don't know because, as I've said over again, this is not good faith bargaining. I'm sure it goes back to the president's view of him as being a great deal maker, but I don't think he remotely understands the consequences to human beings of what he's doing. It's not about efficiency, I can tell you that, not even remotely. Um, but a lot of these people are true believers that there shouldn't be government, very limited government, and we should all just survival of the fittest. And that's not how humans have evolved. We're not the biggest, fastest, strongest animal in on the earth, but where we evolved was because we learned how to collaborate with one another. And um, I don't understand it. And I'm not trying to be Pollyannish. This is my true belief system about how bad it is. We're going to fight, and we are fighting like hell. We're fighting in the courts. We're fighting very hard for elections. Um, and we want to help. We're going to be here and do everything we can every day to help you all individually. When you call, we open a case, we contact the agency, and we track this. And I can read these anytime I want. And then we're just going to keep fighting. But it's going to be hard, folks. If they go ahead and do this, which I believe they're going to, I think what make them come to their senses is what's happening. The American public and all the polling we're seeing, and he lives by polls. They don't. There's they don't like this, and they ascribe the blame overwhelmingly. Decline to states and Democrats, obviously, but more and more Republicans are also responding to polls and saying, I don't want the government to shut down. I want it to be more efficient. Fine, let's have that discussion. But let's not make it on irrational political opinion. Let's evaluate it. And then we can respect our different perspectives and ideology, hopefully.
Excellent. I think we have time for one more question, and this one's from Diane on YouTube. Are the tax cuts passed by the Republican Congress permanent? It is not possible, sorry, is it not possible in the future to change the tax structure?
Only if we win elections and we get enough Republicans to agree that this level of obscene concentration of wealth. I mean, I don't know what these people do with this money. I've known some wealthy people, but I don't know what you do with all this money. I was always told that, you're going to die. I mean, having come close to it, it's just a reality of our existence. And, you can't take it with you. Um, so we can't undo it unless we have enough votes in both houses. Um, it's been passed, it's been signed by the President of the United States. There are component parts of it um, that we are arguing in court that are illegal and we're winning. But overall, in order to undo what they've done in this HR1, transferring the wealth, it's going to require um, actions by your elected officials to correct it. And that's the way the system works and the Constitution works. And they won elections, and now they're doing what they're doing, which is hard to believe, but now we know. So what do? We got to fight. We got to be engaged, and we can't be misled. So if you don't believe what I'm saying, I'm fine with engaging in a conversation, given I'm one person who represents 750,000 people, but we can have rational conversations, but we got to get back to that and stop what they're about to do. So I'll be back there on Sunday or Monday and Tuesday. The Republicans won't, as of right now. They cancel session, but we Democrats are going back to sit there and say, we're here, we're ready to engage. And while you're off doing whatever you're doing, we're here in the Capitol and we're ready to engage. And if the Senate came to its senses and worked out something that actually could pass, send it back to us. And then we're here to vote for it. And hopefully the Republicans would agree. But having the current administration intimidating people is not conducive to a thoughtful process.
I think we might be able to squeeze one more
All right.
question in.
That's a message to me to be succinct.
No, that's okay. You're doing great. So this last question is from Mark. Will telehealth end September 30th, or can we get bipartisan support to improve and make it permanent?
Telehealth will still happen, but it'll affect the people who aren't covered by the people who are going to lose their Medicare, Medicaid, Medi-Cal in California. So I'm sorry, different states are allowed different things. So for people who qualify, they're going to have a harder time. Now, my jurisdiction in my subcommittee is employer-employee based healthcare, but it's all blended together to a large degree. And it all affects one another. So we're already seeing premiums go up, and we've had bipartisan hearings about the rate of denials from insurance companies. So claims for your employee-based healthcare has skyrocketed, and some health insurance companies are particularly bad. At the same time, the Republicans had reduced the workforce who investigate these claims, so that we have one federal inspector for every 17,000 health plans. So we've had hearings about this. So even telehealth is really a good model. I believe in it as a consumer. I'm a survivor of stage 4 cancer. And telehealth, particularly during COVID, was great. We want to make sure there's not abuse, so there's got to be proper oversight, but it's a very efficient use of delivery of health services for a lot of cases. And obviously, if you have higher acuity, you have to see a physician in person. But balancing that, I think, particularly in California, we've done a remarkable job. Sorry, I'm getting your head shaking up and down,
You're
so I'm
doing
going to conclude with that.
So now, thank you. I just wanted to know, do you have any additional final thoughts, Congressman?
No, I just want to really thank you all for joining us. I'm very proud of the fact that in the last 11 years, our office myself and our staff have held more town halls than any other member of Congress. I really enjoy it, and I enjoy your input. And for people who disagree, we're not enemies. We have a difference of opinion. So I'm happy to engage as long as we do it constructively and civilly. You may be right, but yelling at one another and being passionate is one thing, but that's part of the problem in this country right now. So let's be firm about our beliefs. And I feel very strongly because I feel like this administration is attacking Americans. So I'm going to do everything I can passionately to defend and fight for what I think is right. But I'm willing to, and I want to get to the point where this stops, this madness stops. We go back to the process and we engage in legitimate differences of opinion. So I just want to thank you for being part of it. I appreciate your input. Don't think I don't listen, because I do. I read every comment. And as I say, it can be hard because people are very engaged, and one of me for 750,000 people is a challenge. But I want to hear from people. If you disagree, let's hear about it. But I don't think any of us, the vast majority of Americans, can agree that this is no way to engage in the wonderful experiment that is American democracy. The last best hope for humankind, as Jefferson said. So let's engage. Let's disagree. I'm going to fight. I'll be honest, um, appropriately and energetically, because I think this is an attack on Americans, and I think it's unethical, immoral, and illegal. So let's fight for it, but then get back to where we can start engage in a way that's more constructive. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Congressman. The town hall will be available on YouTube and on our YouTube and Facebook page if you'd like to watch it again or share it with your friends. Please do not hesitate to call our office if we can be of any help to you. Thank you again for joining us.